Charles T., 23 Edmund Street. Just want to, I hope you don't forget that it's been so long, but there's some reason for it. One, that this is a really big building. And Tom Snavitz said, on one of these many hearings, this is a big ask. And Phil Verza said, at the first hearing, this building's unbuildable without relief. Well, this lot's unbuildable. So this is taking something out of nothing. And we've gone in nothing, and we have to go back to the Concord Alewife plan, and the Concord Alewife plan, page 1, doesn't leave this out. The Concord Alewife plan says it goes from Blanchard to Danahy Park. And the whole thing is sort of what this woman was just saying, is about establishing pedestrian connections all the way through the quadrangle, across, through the mall, and out to Danahy Park, which is where they put phase 1 of the project, is right in that connection, because the connections with pedestrians want to be shorter. So, in the Concord Alewife plan, it actually says your special permit conditions are to, contribution to construction, or construction of a section of the infrastructure element. So the special permit process in this area is supposed to yield the access, the rights of way, and also the construction. So, and I'd like to quote Chairman Russell from the last time. He said, and though I admire how they took your words about knocking off the corners of the building, it says, I don't believe you have the right to max out every single limit in the zoning ordinance. You can't meet all the standards, and you may have to give up some units. You're not entitled to first the size and the number of units and then try to accomplish everything else. So my thought is that we should actually get something out of this special permit, because in particular because phase 1 just was in the wrong spot, and it's going against the plan. And to get the connectivity across to the mall, is what's offered is on the other side of the building. If we look on the slide here, on the other side of the building is we got a 5-foot strip to nowhere. And I'm suggesting that the building, that we create a 20-foot right-of-way from New Street over to the bike path. And you probably can move the building to the left, but I'm probably going to have to, you probably have to give up some units and make the building a little shorter. But this is what you're supposed to be doing according to the plan, which is basically, which actually goes out and says real connectivity, and it says smaller block sizes. This will start making the smaller block sizes, because we'll have access between the blocks. And they're already proposing that they'll have private access to the bike path. So this is just saying, is smaller blocks. This is. I'm trying to propose something that will create the public going through the project, rather than the project being this massive wall, which it is. And everything they're talking about is just sort of camouflage to make the building, oh, it's not really that big. But what's going to really not make it that big is if we have access through. And of course, this is all for the future. If you want something to do right now, is they should pay for rebuilding New Street, or some portion of rebuilding New Street. And that's what's in the Concord Alewife plan. This is that it's not in the Alewife Overlay District 5, is because the Alewife Overlay District 5 covers the business zone that's on either side of Route 16. It wouldn't have been appropriate to do it for industrial A1. So that I think is a very closer reading. We went through part of that last week, and most of you were here. So that's what I suggest. And instead of having this little service alley, we make this to what we really should have had. Because otherwise, if you go down to the far end and you look over here on the model, you're just a lot further away from the entrance to Danahy Park. which is what it's all about. It's about connecting the park all the way through out to the other side.
Charles, your
Route
time is
16.
up.
Thank you.
I think if the task were to take something which is fundamentally flawed and to mitigate it as, to as great extent as possible, I think we've done a great job in that. I feel the need to at least state one last time my persistent feeling that the building is simply too long. Or at least I think that it's too long, and in retrospect, I wish that early on in this process, that we had asked the applicant to explore other options and show us how this would work if the building had been broken into at least two structures. And while I'm not going to dig my feet in on this subject at this late date in the review of this project, I guess I would ask Suzanne and staff and anybody else who's listening or reporting on this to convey to future applicants that at least this board member has a great issue with such long buildings, and be on notice that this is going to be an issue and concern and possible area of criticism in planning board review and process in the future. I guess I also want to take the opportunity, by the way, to thank staff. I assume primarily Jeff, Suzanne, I don't know who others who have really prepared good, helpful memos on this thing to remind us where we are in this long process, to remind us what the applicable standards and regulations are, and to make helpful recommendations. I didn't agree on all those recommendations, especially insofar as it related to the length of the building, but I think this is what we want and need from staff. I think it also helps the public understand what the hell is going on here, and what our parameters are. Ultimately, I'm going to support granting a special permit for this building. As I say, I think the applicant has been responsive and has mitigated some of the worst elements of this. But notwithstanding my support, I just wanted to be clear, going forward, that I think these long buildings are a problem, and I think that our process can be adapted, revised somewhat to convey that message early on.
Wonderful discussion here after a year, but the question that was ringing my ears, somebody posed perhaps rhetorically, but it's not going to prevent me from answering it, was what do we get? And so I agree with Ted, we're getting housing, and we really need housing, so that's terrific. We're getting the power poles out, and it's a great thing. You know what, we're getting a street. I don't think anybody would have rebuilt this street if there wasn't the impetus to do something constructive here in terms of making a project. And so that has gotten the city motivated to create something here. And so that's terrific, and there'll be a process to design that responsibly. We're getting a building that is broken down in its mass, and through this process, the architect has worked tirelessly to try to take what is a large structure and used pretty skillfully all the tricks in the book to address that. We've got a long conversation. We've got a really long conversation, and the presentation started tonight with the Attorney Rafferty saying, well, there was a neighborhood group that came out of this, and you know what? There was, and that neighborhood group has had a positive influence on the discussion around planning issues in this district, which is not inconsiderable. We're looking at it in a very, very different way, I think, up in Alewife, because of the concerted and tireless efforts by that community group, which has made us very aware of the traffic issues, made us aware of the environmental issues, the serious environmental issues in and around this site, made us aware of, in fact, our very own processes and whether We've been transparent and efficient in administration of the code, and I mean that in all seriousness. I think that that's been a really, really positive part of what we're doing here. That probably disappointed that I'm going to suggest that here's yet another planning board member that's going to be in favor of this tonight, but that notwithstanding, I do appreciate all of the input they've had.
That shopping center is going to stay the way it is for quite some time. But when it does change, and someday it will change, and hopefully it will change to the more block-oriented thing, I still think that the access points to the park are going to be crucial in how that works. That having I could imagine you could actually somehow work in another entrance to Dennehy Park from the other corner. Somehow put a ramp up the slope. You could get into the park. There aren't too many ways into the park. There could be more. But I don't think you're going to do it in the middle. And then if you look kind of between 75 and the next residential project, now known as the auto body shop, and I'm not suggesting that anybody in this room is going to do that one, but somebody is apt to do that sometime. As you look here from the model, you can see that in a way that end, going over past the end of the motel, yeah, it's going right now goes through like some aisle of Whole Foods, but if you were redeveloping that, that might be where that next connector would come. And that would certainly help people who are trying to get to Alewife.